to the Get Real Movies podcast. My name is Daniel Chadwick Schubert. I'm your host, and this is episode 26, where we will be talking to Mike Flynt, the subject of the film The Senior. Mike was wonderful to chat to about this film. It really felt like one of those old school Disney movies. Remember the Titans, The Rookie, very similar to that in terms of it's one of those stories that you really can't believe it's true, but I'm very lucky where I got to speak to Jim Morris about The Rookie, and now I'm speaking to Mike Flynt about The Senior. It's a story about someone who is, you think, aged out of going to college, 59, Mike Flynt, but he decides to go back to college and do his final year and also walk on the football team. Mike's story is so amazing to me because I play soccer once a week with a bunch of guys who are plus 40, and they find it difficult to play once a week, and that's, at a pretty low level. Whereas in this is college football with a bunch of young 20-year-olds, and his story was just too good not to be talked about. And I'm really glad they finally made a movie. Michael Chiklis plays Mike in this movie. Very fitting, and he did a really, really great job as well. So I do implore you to check out the movie. Angel Studios is releasing it all over America and Canada, and it will be on their platform shortly after it's done in theaters as well. So I will give you all that info at the end. But for now, here's my interview with Mike Flynt.
And now it is my pleasure to welcome Mike Flynt to the show. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate very much you having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I mentioned before we started recording, I was very excited to talk to you about this because I feel as though this is very much one of those sports movies that just fills your heart up. And I think this reminds me a lot, I think starting with the trailer, this reminds me a lot of those early 2000s Disney movies where it just, it's these stories that you think are impossible and they make no sense, but then you learn their true stories. So Mike, before I get into the movie and a lot of the things about it, I'd love for you to tell people your story in your own words, I guess.
Okay. Growing up very young, my father was a World War II veteran, and he used a lot of the training he received in World War II through D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, where he was wounded, in his philosophy about how I should be raised in West Texas, which involved, we started boxing when I was age 6, and that was a ritual that went on a regular basis for about 7 years. But it wasn't, I've said many times, it wasn't so much the physical training that I received as it was the mental training that I received. I called it mind games years later. He just called it being ready. But it was all about confrontations, fighting, and being able to recognize in a room that you were in who might be a troublemaker, and then to visualize in your mind what it is that you would try to accomplish if a problem started. So I was a good person. I was not a troublemaker, but I became a trouble seeker. And that kind of followed me throughout my young life. I was a good football player when I was young. There in West Texas, my senior year, we won state championship for the first time at Permian High School that started that winning tradition that inspired the book and the subsequent movie Friday Night Lights. And I went on into college on full football scholarship at Sul Ross State University. Sul is short for Sullivan. Sullivan Ross was a former governor of Texas. But I was there at Sul Ross. I was leading tackler on that team. I was an all-conference linebacker. Going into my senior year, I was appointed to check rooms make sure everyone was in during curfew, during two-a-days. And we were picked to win the conference. And the Lone Star Conference at that time, it was one of the premier conferences in the nation because we were integrated. A lot of the other conferences weren't integrated. We had some great athletes playing in that conference. And a couple of guys were late, curfew. They took exception to me telling them when they couldn't come and go. It got physical. One of them got hurt, and they called the president of the college, the head coach, and the next morning he explained to me that based on my previous history there at Sul Ross, I'd been in 10 fights over a 2-year time period. Regardless of my good reasons for why I did them, the administration didn't have a very high opinion of me. And so the president of the college told our head coach, "It's you or Mike Flynt. Who's it going to be?" I've heard his name for the last time. And so I was kicked out, lost my senior year, and then went on with my life from there.
Really leads us into the film The Senior, and I think it's quite interesting. It shows it quite well than your early life. It obviously portrays a more maybe negative image of your father than you presented there. Do you think it does an honest portrayal of your father in the film? I know there were things learned later in the film that we can discuss, but do you think it honestly portrayed how you thought of your father at that time, or do you think it maybe played with the truth a bit there?
Well, there were some things about it that were not true. There were some things that were not shown that were much more harsh than what was shown. The bottom line was it was an accurate portrayal of my father in those circumstances. In other words, whenever we put on those gloves, I always felt like that getting in a fight, a lot of kids don't want to fight. I never felt like somebody was going to hit me as hard as my dad did. And so I wasn't worried about fighting. And Dad had these just incredible values about right and wrong. And so I was never to start trouble. I mean, if he found out I was in a fight and I started it, well, that was, that was a big problem. If I got in a fight, then I was supposed to win. And so, but he was very harsh, and everything. As I got older, I realized what he went through in World War II that had so changed him. He was just a different person. He had 3 brothers, my uncles, that I talked with after I was grown about him and the changes that the war caused in his life.
Yeah, and that's something that's, I think, prevalent in anyone who knows a World War II veteran. My Oma survived World War II in occupied Belgium, and some of the stories she told me just about the German occupation, kind of sends shivers down your back. So I could definitely see that. I do have to say, though, I think James Badge Dale as your dad I'm sure I'd be happy with that actor portraying him. He's quite a good actor. I like him a lot.
Yeah, he really is. It was just amazing and wonderful to watch him work. It really was.
Yeah, and then leading into the story, which is, at the forefront of The Senior, and that is you walking on at your old university. And it shows it in the film as you going to an old reunion with a bunch of old football buddies and then finding out and starting to gestate over and think about it. But I'd love to know how it really came about, how you decided I'm going to walk on and redo my senior year as a 59-year-old.
Well, that was pretty accurate. Losing that senior year, that team, we'd gone 8-3 the year before, and we had everybody back. And I was team captain. I was leading tackler on that team. I was all conference linebacker. Those guys would play for me. And after I got kicked out, they went 4-6-1. They didn't even have a winning season. And so I shouldered that. And so I carried that burden all those years, and it became actually the greatest regret that I had in life. And I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't tell anyone about it. And so I go back to this reunion down in San Antonio, Texas, and what it portrayed there in the movie was pretty much what happened. I told these guys, they said, what was it about that one fight, Mike, when you had so many? What was it about that one fight that got you kicked out? And I just told them when I was young, I made a lot of poor decisions, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said, what gets me more than anything is I still think that I can play. They started laughing at me with the exception of one guy. It was Stan Williamson, and he said, why don't you? I looked at him and I said, what? I said, no, there's no way after all these years that I have eligibility. He said, hey, listen, if that's your greatest regret in life, if you think you can run with those guys, if you think you can take the hits, it's Division III now. They've got a whole new set of rules. You need to check it out. Well, that's all I could think about was the rest of the weekend. And so I did. I started checking. I found out through the rules division that I still had a semester of college left. And the lady doing the research, she said, "Now, Mr. Flynt, how old did you say you are?" I said, "Well, I'm 59. She said, "Well, not only are you eligible, but I will come watch you play." And so that basically opened the door for me to then go in and meet with the head coach and make the request to walk on for his team with his team.
And so when you had that first tryout or that first session where you were with the younger guys, I'm 27 now and I play soccer, and I'm already starting to feel things in my body. I have to stretch now, which I never had to do before. Well, I probably did, but I just didn't. How was that, getting back on the football field and experiencing that first hit again?
Well, it was I've told people for years that not every journey has to have a destination. Just do something, go, get out there and get started and see where it takes you. And I'd never stopped running sprints. I had been a strength and conditioning coach for years, and I always had a philosophy about my coaching. I'd never ask one of my athletes to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. So I always stayed in great shape, helping other people get in shape. Well, after I got out of coaching, I didn't stop. I just kept running sprints. I kept training. So at 59, all of a sudden, I have an opportunity to try out with the team, and it was my ability to perform in that spur of the moment scenario that enabled me to have an opportunity to try out for the team. But that first day when we put on those pads, see, I was blessed when I was young in that I was never hurt. I was a good football player, but I'd never played football in a 59-year-old body before. And oh my gosh, and I've said it so many times, but I didn't think there was going to be enough ice in Alpine, Texas for me to make it through two-a-days. I mean, when you're young, that recovery time, and these coaches, they've got two-a-days set up based on recovery time for 18, 19, 20-year-old guys, and so 59, I needed a lot more time that I didn't have, and so I just had to push through it. I just had to work through it. But it was really the greatest physical challenge, bar none, that I've ever dealt with.
I'd love to take it to the side for a sec before we continue. Is talking about Michael Chiklis playing yourself, seeing him running out there. I'd love to ask, what did you think of his performance, first of all, and then how fun was it? Because I saw at the end of the film that you're there and you were on the set. So how fun was it watching him go through some of the things you went through at 59?
Well, I was amazed by Michael Chiklis and the incredible physical effort that he gave and pulled off. The things that he was able to do when they were filming those dummies that he was hitting, running the stands, all the different things that he was doing, he actually did those things. And he was incredible. There were other people that were talked about as far as playing me in that role. They couldn't have pulled it off. Chiklis was the only one that could have done it. I mean, and it was all in his heart. He was so committed to honoring me and what I'd done that it showed up in every aspect of the part that he played. It was amazing.
It was quite fun to watch and amazing as well. Then you get into the season, you've made the team, there's the great revelation. And then as the season goes on, there's a little bit of animosity between you and one of the team members. I'm wondering how they showed that on the screen. Is that how it came about? Is that how you got injured for a major part of the season in practice? Or was it a little maybe Hollywoodized there?
Well, there was some Hollywood in there, but I had some minor injuries the first couple of weeks during two-a-days, and they weren't major. We had like 8 or 9 guys that were out during two-a-days for injuries, and I didn't have any major injuries, but it slowed me some. That kept me from being able to play in the first couple of games. I then had one of the players that was a senior had some animosity towards me because he felt like I was there for the publicity. Nothing could have been further from the truth. I didn't want anybody to even know about it. But again, there was no way that you could keep that a secret in today's technology world. He, took me on pretty good in practice one day. And in fact, he arranged himself in the line so that it would be him going against me in a tackling drill. And he weighed a little over 300 pounds. He weighed, I think, 305. And I took him on and everything went black. I stood up and I couldn't lift my right arm. And the trainer happened to be standing close by, and he walked over and he said, "What's wrong, Flynt?" And I said, "I think I pinched a nerve." I said, I can't lift my arm." And he said, "Hang on just a second. Just stand there with your arms by your side." And he took his hands and put them on top of my helmet and just pressed down like that. I just dropped to my knees. Oh, the pain was excruciating. And he said, "Okay." He helped me up. He said, "This is over." He said, this is done. He said, that's not a pinched nerve. That's your spine. And he said, "You're done." And I said, "Wait, doc." I said, "There's no way." I said, "Look, I've got to see an orthopedist." And he got me in. I had 2 badly bulged discs in my neck. And the orthopedist told me it was over. And at that same time, about 3 days prior to that, a young man by the name of Kevin Everett plays for the Buffalo Bills. He ruptured those same 2 discs in his neck. And they thought that he was going to be, if he survived, that he would be a quadriplegic. But by the grace of God, he recovered. He was okay, but he never played another down of football. And at my age, it was a major concern. And so, but that one injury changed things for me because, but I told the orthopedist, I said, "Look, I've got a PhD in Mike Flynt. I know my body. So you tell me what I need to do and I'll get it done for you to clear me to play." And so he told me, I got it done. He released me to play, and I was able to play in the last 5 games of the season.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because they also show your relationship between your wife Eileen and yourself in the film, and I think it really takes an interesting turn when your injury happens because at least in the film she kind of lays down the law. She's like, "I understand that you want to do this and it makes sense, but you need to look after yourself." So were those the tough conversations you had to have with your family about coming back because it was so risky to come back, or had they already been had and did they already know exactly, that you would look after yourself?
Well, the conversations with Eileen, we prayed through it, and she knew me, and she knew that I was bound and determined to go forward, and so she was trusting in God, but she was trusting in the orthopedist that if I wasn't get that swelling down in my neck and those disc in my neck, that he wouldn't release me to play. And if I couldn't perform, if I wasn't able to do the things that he'd asked me to do, then he wouldn't release me. And she was okay with that. But she knew that I knew, and I'd promised her that things had changed for me. I was no longer that stick your head in there linebacker that I was when I was young. My Micah and our daughters, they weren't fans at all of me continuing forward. Micah got real upset with me. In fact, he told me, he said, "Dad, this dream of yours becomes a nightmare if you wind up in a wheelchair or worse. And what about Mom?" He said, "Have you thought about Mom?" And so I just told him that I really, I was committed to doing this, and I just felt like I needed to go forward. So that was depicted in the film, a little bit as well.
Quite honestly, yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned you were able to play the last 5 games. In the movie, they showed it more as you were able to play the last game. So I'd love to know the end of the season and that final game. Was that, the Disney moment as well, or did it at least play out like that, or was that over a few different games that they put together?
Well, this is a kind of a spoiler alert, but the last game that my first game back on the field in 37 years, we won that game in triple overtime, 45-42, and I was on the field when we won the game. It was the most incredible. It was the most incredible game, but they couldn't depict that in the shooting. But I mean, it went back and forth and in triple overtime, and there was no way that we were supposed to win that game. But that was my first game back. The stands were absolutely packed. There were cameras everywhere. All the major networks were there, all of that. And so it was just really so incredible that my teammates and how they performed and the things that they did. But it was pretty exciting, and it was something that that memory I will have forever.
Yeah, and I really loved that throughout the movie, but mainly towards the end, they put in some of the real ESPN and Sports Center clips, and I could just imagine how fun it must have been in that age where there wasn't constant social media, so you might just turn on the sports channel and find out this story, and it's something that you probably would have continued watching. So it was really fun to watch, and thank you, obviously, for putting that spoiler in there. I do implore people to go see it because it is coming out in theaters soon. But I'd love to ask, when it comes to the film, we talked about how it got a lot of things right. What were some of the things that maybe you don't have to be unhappy with them, but where it was a little further from the truth, or it just didn't happen, but you understand why they put it in? Anything like that would be interesting to know about.
Yeah, well, in Hollywood, in anything that has appeal to people, they don't realize it when they're watching the film, but there has to be conflict. There has to be conflict in the movie that conflict is overcome to provide an ending that is, exciting, heartwarming, something that's memorable for people. Well, I had the conflict that I had with my dad was there. It was tremendous conflict. But my dad had died years ago, and so they were looking at it, the screenwriter and the producers, and they said, okay, there was conflict between Mike and his dad that wasn't resolved, but what about Micah, Mike's son, and Mike? Was there conflict in their relationship? Well, there wasn't. I taught Micah to box. We started boxing just like I did with my dad. I never once hit my son. And we just had a tremendous relationship. And in the movie, it shows some tension. And so, but he was okay with it. And I was okay with it because of the comfort I have in my relationship with him. And so that was something that was hard to watch for me, for people to think that, I would do that with my son. But he was okay with it, so I was okay with it. And as it turns out in the film, it's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, and that coming together, and I won't get into too many spoilers, but the coming together in the film and the forgiveness, I think that's very much a theme of the film, is forgiveness and not trying to get over those regrets. Not a lot of people can go back and put things right like you did, but being able to kind of overcome that regret and put it in the background and move past it is very important, and it definitely comes through in the film. One other thing that we talked about before we started recording was I saw the parallels very much between this film and The Rookie, which was about Jim Morris. And I had him on the podcast very early on, and I love talking to Jim. And I learned that you actually know Jim quite well. So I'd love to ask you about that a little bit.
Well, I wish I had an opportunity to meet with Jim personally. Jim and I have Mark Chiardi, the producer that made The Rookie, the movie, that also Mark has been involved in my story from day one. And so that was our connection. Mark introduced us, and I went to Jim over the last, 18 years, multiple times just to get his input based on his experience about different things, everything from the movie itself to our public speaking platforms, places, things like that. He's been an encouragement for me. Over the years when things would be, it looked like everything was going to happen, and then all of a sudden it would fall apart. And he would always be there. I could text him, get his input, and he's a super guy. He really is.
Yeah, he I only got to speak to him for just under an hour, but he came across as a really lovely individual, and he was just a real blast to talk to. But as have you been, I've really enjoyed chatting to you about your story. I love to ask before the end of the podcast some of the films, if you're a film watcher, if you're not, books are fine too, but some of the films that you love watching or that maybe inspired you in life, because I love to make recommendations to my audience, but I'd much rather my guests do because they'll have a much more varied, eclectic taste than I do.
Wow, there's just so many great films out there because of my dad and also my father-in-law. My father-in-law won 2 Bronze Stars in during D-Day, and his infantry went all the way from Utah Beach into Berlin for the surrender of the Germans, and just an incredible man. So the Longest Day, Saving Private Ryan, those war movies are because of my love for my country and my dad and his love, and my father-in-law and his devotion and love. Those are movies that I thoroughly enjoy. I love time travel movies. Get that? I love Somewhere in Time and then Back to the Future movies, because in my story and going back to play, I was back on that same field that I had been on 37 years before. I was going through all the drills. I was playing football again like I did when I was young. Every day it was like going back in time. But I knew at my age, I knew how fast it was going to go by. And so I didn't waste any of it. I mean, in spite of the pain, in spite of all the hard work, in spite of all the risk and the danger, I rejoiced in every minute because I knew that I was going to turn around and it was going to be over. And so, but I love those time travel movies. I love those. I love the quality depictions of Christ in movies, and some of the things, the Passion of Christ, and some of the things Angel has done in The Chosen and things like that. But my movie interest over the years has changed. Different things with my age and things that I watch privately, like some of the war movies, things that I watch with Eileen.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Those are some great film recommendations. I've seen the majority of them, and I love them all as well. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before I let you go, is there anywhere where people could find you and kind of follow your story as it still progresses, or anywhere, any social media or anything like that?
Well, I'm in the process right now of redoing my website, MikeFlynt.com, and it's Flynt. And we're working with Angel Studios and Wayfarer Studios. And I'm getting everything set up on my website so that current events, recent updates, and things like there's publicity they're sending out is on the website. But my story's there. Several things about me is there on the website.
Perfect. Well, I will let everyone know where that is, and I'll put it in the description. But thank you again so much for coming on. It was really wonderful to chat to you, and good luck with the film. And I can't wait for everyone else to see it.
Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate you having me. I've enjoyed speaking with you as well.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
So thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Mike. He was really gracious with his time, and he's a really interesting guy to chat to, and his movie recommendations are quite solid. So if you do get a chance to watch any of those films, Back to the Future is a favorite of mine, and Saving Private Ryan as well. The Longest Day is an older film, but also well worth your time as well. So definitely check him out on his website, Mike Flynt, FLYNT.com, and definitely go to the Angel Studios website to find if this is playing in a theater near you. So as always, thank you so much for listening. Please rate us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to us. You can also leave a comment on Spotify now. And until next time, I've been Daniel, and we'll see you all at the movies. Thanks so much.